Hello, my friends and family from Life's Journey United Church of Christ. And in addition to hello to you from Life's Journey United Church of Christ, I want to say hello to our friends and neighbors. Well, it has been almost a year since um, I shared reflection in the midst of our church's um, experience of North Carolina's shelter in place orders. And I want to just share some quotes about that while I make an announcement to you. Um, in that reflection, I dug it out today just to remember. I shared some thoughts on Zechariah 8. Zechariah 8 says, "The Lord of heavenly forces proclaims, I care passionately about Zion. I burn with passion for her. The Lord proclaims, I have returned to Zion. I will settle in Jerusalem. Jerusalem will be called the city of truth. The mountain of the Lord of the heavenly forces will be the holy mountain. The Lord of heavenly forces proclaims, old men and women will again dwell in the plazas of Jerusalem. Each of them will have a staff in their hand because of their great age. The city will be full of boys and girls playing in its plazas. The Lord of heavenly forces proclaims, even though it may seem to be a miracle for the few remaining among this people in these days, should it be a miracle for me, says the Lord of heavenly forces. The Lord of heavenly forces proclaims, I'm about to deliver my people from the land of the east and the land of the west. I will bring them back so they will dwell in Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be their God in truth and righteousness. The Lord of the heavenly forces proclaims, be strong, you who are hearing these words. In that reflection, a little over a year ago, I reflected when I looked at these words on how that need to be in shelter at home, shelter in place, and to socially distance to slow the spread of COVID had become painful for many of us, keeping us away from family, friends, and each other. And then I said these words, like Zechariah's people, we each see the empty streets, the empty squares, the empty restaurants and church buildings, and we are reminded of the losses we have faced and have yet to face. In just such a moment, Zechariah's promise is needed. This is not the end of the story. Just as the sun comes out after a rain and flowers blossom each spring, even after the most chilling winter, so during this time of Eastertide, God will bring life in the midst of death, new beginnings in the midst of loss. There is another side to our journey, and we will get there together. Friends, what a difference a year makes. Before I sat down to this desk that I'm at the church office to write out these thoughts, I met with one of you. And we did some visits in the community to see some people who needed to see us as members of the church. And as we traveled, I didn't see empty streets as we did a year ago, but full streets, busy with people going to meals, going to stores, visiting with friends and family, albeit with all of them having masks on their smiling faces. You know, I'm so happy in light of that, in light of seeing that promise begin to be fulfilled around us. That now, just under a year later, to be saying to you, all that are listening, now we are getting there together. After over a year of worshiping together via Zoom and Facebook Live, from our homes and cars, workplaces, the beach, and all kinds of other places, and then sometime together in the fall and in the spring now, worshiping together outside of this church building on the lawn. I'm so excited to say, this Sunday, May 2nd, we invite you to join us as we begin again to worship together in the sanctuary. I'm happy to personally invite you all to join us as we resume in-person worship in our church's sanctuary, starting this Sunday, May 2nd at 10:30 a.m. When Zechariah's people were not able to worship in the temple, which we read about a year ago and we read about now, and finally returned to worshiping in the four walls of their house of God, things were not quite the same as they were when that period, which was not a year, but almost 40 years, when that period ended, it was not quite the same. The temple looked different. Worship was different. And there are going to be some things different for you and me too. So I want to share some of the things that are going to be different when we gather together for worship. And most of you will also get a letter with this information in the mail. Here are some of the things that will be different when you gather with us now, at least the next few weeks. At this time, our choir is not yet active. Now, I've talked to the choir director, and he is chomping at the bit, ready to get our choir back together when the things we hear from the health department say it's the right time. But this time, the choir is not yet active, and we will have pre-recorded pieces, just as we've done on Zoom and Facebook Live. Now, you need to know about this. For those of you like Justin who are chomping at the bit, as the state lifts other social distancing measures for its secular businesses, we're going to, as church leaders, consider when to lift ours. And one of those measures we will lift when the time is right is we will begin to resume the choir. But we want to do it when it will make the most sense with what the health guidelines say. For the time being, for the next several Sundays, we will not be passing a plate, having communion, or singing out loud. Now, some of you never sang out loud anyway. You just kind of hummed along. So you'll be used to this. But some of you are like me. I like to get my praise on like we used to say in the charismatic church and sing out. But right now, we're going to encourage you to do different than that, as we had done different than that on our lawn service, or worship on the lawn. We will resume all of these things together after COVID has abated enough that they don't pose any health risk. For right now, we're asking, as we were doing on the lawn, for you to sing quietly. And again, some of you are already doing this. Others of you got your praise on like I did. To either sing quietly or meditate on the words of the songs while we listen to the music. We're going to invite you to do that rather than singing out until that restriction is lifted. We're going to invite you to please give online. Or if you don't want to give online, just as we had an offering box over at the on the lawn, we'll also have an offering box either in the narthex or the sanctuary. And if you want communion, we're not doing it all together until we pass some benchmarks with COVID. If you do want communion for yourself or your family, in addition to the at-home communion service I sent out at the beginning of the shelter-at-home order over a year ago, I am happy as pastor to provide communion for you individually or in your household. So reach out to me about that if you need communion. Now, to limit the disease risk, we are only going to be meeting in the sanctuary. We're not going to be using other rooms quite yet. We're not going to be meeting in the nursery, the classrooms, and other areas in the sanctuary for our meetings quite yet. And that means that if you want to socialize before and after worship, we ask you to do it on the church lawn or in the church parking lot. And please keep your masks on or keep your distance. Be careful in that regard about social distancing, since you may not know another person's vaccine status. And parents, we're going to ask you to please allow your children to play in the outdoor play area with the swings, but not in the nursery at this time. This is just temporary. We hope to lift some of these particular restrictions when we see what the lifted restrictions in June look like. We're going to ask that you please wear your mask at all times. And I don't want to sound like like you're in a nursery and you're toddlers, but I do want to demonstrate how you do this. Please pull them over the mouth and the nose like this, not like this, not like this, and not like I saw this guy in Target who had it like this. What he thought he was doing, I don't know. It's not a hairnet. So please wear it properly over the mouth and nose when you're at worship. And if you need to step outside of the church to get a breath, do that away from other people. But while on the church premises around others, please wear the mask over your mouth and nose. We're going to ask that you follow these directions for entering and exiting. Go into the narthex door, which are the glass doors by the office, and out through the door at the other side of the building. So you'll pass. You'll head on the right away from the sanctuary. If the sanctuary is on your left, you'll pass my office and go out that door there. Be prepared when you gather in the sanctuary. At least during this initial month, our windows and doors will be open to allow good airflow. This airflow keeps the germs from accumulating, and it creates a similar safety for a meeting as we would have outside. You may wish to bring a jacket, light jacket, or a sweater in case it's a cold morning. Children must remain with families and must be accompanied if they need to use the bathroom facilities or to play outside until the COVID restrictions are lifted. And a part of why we want you with them is the rules you're using at home with your kids, and someone else's kids might have other rules. And this way you can ensure their safety based on what you're doing. Guests and members, we will be keeping a record of who's here and how to contact you so that on the off chance that there's COVID exposure, which hasn't happened during any of our outdoor services, either in the fall or the spring, and hasn't happened in any of the events at the church so far that we did outside, like our prayer walk or our giving out palm branches. But in case, we will be doing that. So don't be surprised if somebody asks what your name is and writes it down, or if someone asks for your phone number for this purpose. Now, for the time being, I feel like this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, since as I said, some of you haven't really been having to do this like I've had to do this with my job at hospice. For the time being, we're going to sit 6 feet away from those not a part of our personal households. Great thing about our sanctuary, chairs move. We've already got groups that are 6 feet away, and you can adjust them, pull a seat over, push a seat away. We will be 6 feet away from those who are not a part of our personal households. However you define household for social distancing. Some people call it your bubble. We will encourage you while you are in worship and on the premises to exercise social distancing measures while interacting and not assume others are vaccinated or have your comfort level about handshakes and hugs. In the church, we have a history of just hugging on people, but we need to ask. We need to see what their comfort level is and if they're safe. Now, I want to say again, because I know we're going along here, remember these changes are temporary and things will become less restrictive as COVID continues to abate. These changes are to protect each other, especially the most vulnerable among us, as an act of love Right now, our state is talking about lifting some more, most restrictions in early June. And sometime after that, further restrictions on once 2/3 of adults are vaccinated. That's the target number for the mask mandate being lifted. And we'll have some options before that's lifted to change and loosen things up here at the church, and we'll have some options after. We plan to revisit our guidelines at both of these points and make any changes we do based on what the health department suggests is safest at this time. Because we want our worship to be a safe place where you feel the sheltering presence of God's love and you can rest secure. Now, personally, I can't wait to see each and every one of you and some of your friends that you invite joining us with worship in our church building. I've been touched as well during this interim between the time I wrote the words I shared earlier and now, just to see how many of you have continued to be the church, even though we were not in the four walls of God's house, even while not in our building. By keeping God in the center of your lives, some of you growing closer to God and to others, and by reaching out in loving ways to our neighbors, and by working to build a more inclusive, loving, and just world. I have been blown away to see that. And though it's an exciting time, it can also be scary. And I want to say some words about that before I stop sharing here. Some of us have had to keep working. I'm one of these in the world with others, learning how to mask, learning how to social distance, learning how to be safe while socializing and working alongside others. Some of us are pros at that. We've gotten quite used to it. Others of us have not had to do that, either working from home. I have some relatives that have been doing that this whole time, or being retired. My dad regularly reminds me he's retired, he can do what he wants. And some of you are in that situation. Now, there's a lot of fear and anxiety may exist then to being in this new situation of gathered together after over a year. And I want to mention two things to those of you who are anxious about coming. First of all, though we long to see you with us in person, hear me here. We understand. We get it. All of us at Life's Journey. We know it may take you a while. This is why we are continuing to provide streaming access to worship services, no longer through both Zoom and Facebook Live. We're going to stop Zoom because Zoom does not play music well live. We're going to use Zoom for Bible studies and small groups, but not for worship, but only through Facebook Live. So we're going to be available through Facebook Live for worship and Zoom for the other events we do at the church until we reopen the other rooms of the church. And I've already sat down with some other folks at the church and walked you through how Facebook Live works. And one of you told me, Pastor, this is a lot easier than I thought it was. I didn't know it was this easy. It's very easy. And so I want you to know, if you don't have someone who can walk you through it at home, I'm happy over the phone or to come by in person or over FaceTime or however you do it, to walk you through how to make Facebook Live work for you if you're not yet comfortable coming in person. We're going to provide that service. But also, if you're anxious, I do want to share words of promise and hope too. I've had a couple of y'all who came through this outdoor worship period in the fall or now in the spring who said, Pastor, I'm coming and I know I'm vaccinated, I'm safe, you're following all the protocol, but I'm nervous. So if you're nervous, either way, I want to share this with you. Last year, I tried to reassure all of us in the midst of our shelter-in-place orders. I said, no, you are not alone. I shared at the beginning of the pandemic the vision Julian of Norwich had in the midst of the pandemic of her day. Something the size of a hazelnut, a nut the size of a popcorn, fragile and held in strong hands. Julian said when she prayed, "What does this mean?" She felt like God said to her that it is all of life, which God made, which God holds, which God keeps out of God's love. All of it will be held secure and kept forever, God said, because God made it in love, a love that will never be broken. Now, as fragile as we feel, and as frightened or impatient, know you and I too are held in these strong hands of God's, and kept in unshakable love. May that grant you comfort now and all your days. These promises that I shared in the midst of the shelter at home orders are still true now, as we can see the light of hope on the other side, and as our lives begin to open up together with the church building. Now as then, God still holds us, still loves us, and still keeps us in steadfast love. God has brought us so very far, life's journey, and I could not be more proud of how we've all pulled together through this. And God will bring us even farther yet as we continue to lean on God and stick together. See you Sunday. God bless.